Wilson and Friends. That was beautiful. Of course, when we lead with our heart, we don't want to lead with our emotion. We want to lead with the higher self that is within us, right? Because just listening to your heart can get you into problems and trouble. How many of you know that? Sometimes you just want something that you want, and it's not necessarily your highest and best thing for you. Today, as we're talking about getting out of debt, I remember many, many years ago watching Dr. Phil, and it was one of those specials where people were going into debt, and the reason they were going into debt is because they were shopping with their heart. You know, they were shopping, buying stuff because they were trying to fill some kind of void inside of themselves. They were shopping and buying stuff to try to comfort themselves. And that's certainly a great way to go into debt, isn't it? Where we're trying to satisfy emotional needs by what we buy. And that's certainly an important awareness to notice if we have a challenge with debt. When are we spending money? Why are we spending money? Are we trying to fill some kind of something missing inside of us instead of looking within and discovering that spiritual heart? Not the emotional heart, but the spiritual heart. That side of us that's in tune with love, that side that's in tune with joy, that side that's in tune with guidance and wisdom. And so today we want to share a few ideas for, in addition to that, how we can get out of debt or stay out of debt and perhaps maybe support someone else who's struggling with that, what can be a burden of debt. Catherine Ponder, in her book, The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, talks about how credit can be a financial asset when used properly, but it can also become a noose, a real burden if it's abused. And it's used in a way that we're buying with credit, with money we don't have, and it causes anxiety, and it causes unrest and fear and worry because we don't know how we're going to pay off what we're putting on our card. And that's a terrible place to be. That can be a real cause of fear and anxiety for a lot of people. And that's what we want to address today. Where on the other hand, used properly, it can be a benefit. She tells a story of a woman who had 3 kids, a single parent, and she needed to make some money. She took a loan, she invested it, and then she made some money through an investment, took that money and invested it in a business, paid back the loan, and then began to prosper. She used credit in a very positive manner. And so that's something that we can all learn from and acknowledge that fear and frustration and resentment and discouragement that a lot of people experience when they're in debt can block the flow of substance and abundance into our life. And so we want to watch those attitudes and learn how to replace those attitudes with a healthier attitude. And one, by the way, is by forgiving ourselves for mistakes that we've made in the past. Forgiving ourselves for ways that maybe we have abused credit, if we have done that. And hey, a lot of Americans have. I don't know what the latest statistic is, but I remember reading a number of years ago, the average American owned about $8,000 in credit, something like that. So, you know, no matter what mistakes we've made in the past, it's important that we not blame ourselves, not feel badly about ourselves, but to learn from the experience, to forgive ourselves and know, hey, if I'd have known better, I'd have done better. And instead to focus on now. What can we do now? And one thing we can do now is, there's 3 things I'm going to share with you today. 1, developing prosperous attitudes. 2 is taking constructive action. And 3, asking for creative ideas, asking for ideas that can help us. So the first is developing or establishing prosperous attitudes. Now, we've been talking about that through this whole series, haven't we? That as within, so without. The importance of what are our attitudes that we're taking. And frustration, feeling the burden of debt, feeling discouraged by debt, that can block the flow. So what can we do to shift that? This one lady and her husband bought some property, some farmland in the hills of Kentucky, the mountains of Kentucky. They thought it's a great place to raise our 3 kids. And he was a traveling salesperson, so he would go out and he would sell, and she was looking after the farm and raising the kids. After a while, she started to feel overly burdened by this situation. She started to resent it. She started to feel bitter about it. And unfortunately, that contributed more to the debt. And she found herself going deeper in debt. And then she came across some prosperous thinking. And she learned that she could shift her attitudes around prosperity. And one afternoon where she was really feeling burdened by her situation, she went up on a little hill overlooking one of the pastures with the cows walking around and whatever cows do in pastures. And she thought, oh, this is so peaceful and beautiful. She started to pray and meditate, and suddenly she became aware of some of these attitudes that she's been carrying. She became aware of her bitterness or resentment. You know, my husband's out there. I know he's trying to do good for the family through his selling, but this is a lot to manage, the workers on the farm and my children and all that. She started to be aware of that. And in that uplifted state of mind, she felt some healing come from just that awareness. How many times have you become aware of a negative emotion, and just by being aware of it, you felt some of it dissipate? Has any of you all experienced that before? Where just by a simple awareness, you were carrying it around unconsciously. You weren't even aware you felt those feelings. And she had this uplifting moment of being aware of it. And then she felt a sense of peace. The next day, she went into town and she ran into a friend, also a farmer, who was looking to buy some new equipment. Well, she happened to have some of that equipment in her farm. So she sold it to a friend. It helped to get her out of debt. She continued to work on her attitude to develop more of a sense of appreciation for her situation, more of a sense of gratitude. Well, I've got healthy children, more of a sense I know my husband is doing the best he can. He's trying to support us. She started to take a different attitude toward the workers and the farm life and all that. And as she took this attitude, things continued to shift. Eventually, her husband decided to move the family into town, to take a contractor's job, and her life started to shift. It started to shift. Eventually, she had time for church, she had time for community activities. Everything shifted when she shifted the resentment, the sense of burden, the sense of judgment and condemnation. She shifted the inside, and it helped shift her life. So that's the importance of replacing negative attitudes like judgment, bitterness. Another person was very critical. He discovered that his work was not moving forward. He was a merchant. People weren't buying. He was struggling with he was offering specials. He was offering special deals. He was doing everything he could, but people weren't buying, and business was hurting. He wasn't selling. He was going into debt. And then he learned about the power of prosperous thinking. And he started to notice that he was critical of himself. He was critical of his business. He was critical of his family. He was critical of his relatives. He was critical of the world. How many of you know some critical people? How many of you know some intimately? Right. Well, being critical, being judgmental, perhaps is one reason why Jesus said, judge not, right? It's not because it's some high in the sky thing that you should just not be judgmental, but rather those attitudes somehow can restrict the flow of good into our life. And so once he recognized that, he began to shift his consciousness. He used a statement like this. Now, some of you, I heard, can you write these affirmations down or put them up on the screen or whatever? Sometimes I don't have these affirmations till the last minute, so that's not always possible. But you can rewatch the videos. You can go online, rewatch the videos, get those ideas even more into your mind, and write down the affirmation. So always keep that in mind as well. So he began to work with an affirmation like this: there is no criticism or condemnation in me, for me or against me. Isn't that a beautiful statement? There is no criticism or condemnation in me, for me, or against me. There's a tendency sometimes in human nature to be paranoid about what other people are thinking about us and why are they acting that way? This is a beautiful statement. He continues on. He says, divine love, wisdom, and order now reveal perfect guidance and produce perfect results in me and in my world. He began to work with these ideas, to let go of criticism, to begin to think better about himself, his business, and other people. And he started to, with his monthly statements that he sent out, he would sometimes send a little thank you note, a note of appreciation to his customers. And what did he find? People started to pay their bills. People started to pay their obligations. People started to do more business. He began to experience a shift. Why? He shifted something inside of himself. So developing prosperous attitudes is a way to help us to get out of debt. What is your situation? Do you have a situation? Well, consider taking note of yourself. That's what Myrtle Fillmore did. When she was diagnosed with 6 months to live, she had a physical challenge, and it was tuberculosis, and she was given 6 months to live. Part of that, not only did she bless the cells in her body, but she also looked at what were some attitudes that she was carrying around that might be impacting her health. Well, lo and behold, because everything's connected, as the sages and saints tell us, everything's connected, everything's energy, right? One presence and power. The Old Testament says it's in all and through all. God is everywhere present. So not only in our bodies, but it's also connected with our finances. So as she began to notice those attitudes and begin to shift them, it contributed to her health and wholeness. And it contributes to our health and wholeness and our finances too, as Catherine Ponder teaches us, that it's all connected. It's all connected. So let's look at what's going on inside of us. The next thing is follow through with prosperous actions. Prosperous actions. And one of the actions we can take is to not talk about being in debt. Unless we're talking to a financial advisor trying to get help, right? Talking about our debt can help cement it in our life, right? It magnifies it, right? What you focus upon, where energy goes, energy flows, right? By telling a lot of people about it, maybe it makes us feel better somehow. In the moment, we're getting some kind of camaraderie, some kind of emotional support, but at the same time, we're kind of affirming it too, aren't we? There's a story in the Hebrew Bible of Elisha who goes to the home of the widow where she's worried, and she tells Elijah, the creditors are going to come after my sons unless I pay my debt. Well, Elijah gives a little subtle teaching by not giving a lot of attention to what she's talking about. Instead, he tells her to get all the oil in the house, collect all the oil, and use that to begin to pay off her debts. So he didn't give her a lot of sympathy or a focus on, her problem and talking about the debt, but rather something constructive that she could do. And that's very important. Anything that we can start to do, shifting our attitudes, gives us a sense that we're doing something. It gives us a sense that we're making progress. How many of you have taken a small step in some regard and it gave you that greater sense of confidence? The same as getting out of debt, is looking at what can I do to start moving in that direction. She tells the story of a person, a contemporary lady, who was having challenges with talking about her problem. She was a widow for 20 years. She had hardships, she had troubles, and she was struggling. She was in debt, and she would complain about it. It was a burden in her life. She resented it. She resisted it, and it was heavy on her. And she learned, this is not helping you. You're talking about this. You know, we said recently, we quoted Jesus who said, death and life are in the power of the tongue, right? Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Limiting conditions in the power of the tongue. The subconscious is always listening, we're told, right? It's like, oh, I'm in terrible debt. My life is a challenge. Oh yeah, okay, let's create more of that for you. It's not God doing it. It's the subconscious and our beliefs frustrating that activity that wants to help us, wants to be a blessing to us. So she realized that she was causing her own problems and she needed to shift it. So she was advised to focus on this scripture, that no matter how hard your life has been in the past, you can shift it. You can shift it. You can experience divine restoration. From the book of Joel in the Hebrew Bible, she was told to focus on this phrase. Now notice, this is not just reading an affirmation. This is shifting her way she was thinking. Instead of poor me, instead of talking about how hard life is, she began to change her habit. She began to establish the habit of reading about how God is working in her life to bring about restoration. So she started to read regularly Joel chapter 2, verses 25 and 26. I will restore to you the years that the locusts have eaten. Ye shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and shall praise the name of Jehovah your God, that hath dealt wondrously with you. Can you see how beginning to shift one's thinking and thinking about the blessings of God working in my life, that God is restoring my life, that even though she'd been struggling up to that point, God was restoring her life. God was shifting her experience. And so now she was changing her consciousness. That became her thought process. And sure enough, everything started to shift for her. She got a raise, different stuff happened, and her life changed. Why? Because something changed inside of her. So keep quiet about the debt. And one recommendation she makes is to list all your obligations and to write down when you expect to have them paid. Write down what are the obligations, maybe that bills that need to be paid and when they're going to be paid. Write it down. Or if it's a list of obligations other people need to pay, write those down and what they owe you. And then begin to trust Spirit in guiding the process. Here's a affirmation for that. I give thanks for the immediate, complete payment of all financial obligations. I give thanks for the immediate, complete payment of all financial obligations. You want to say that with me? This could be your own, this could be other people's. So let's say this together. Together, I give thanks for the immediate, complete payment of all financial obligations. I have faith that with God's help, together, I have faith that with God's help, all obligations are being immediately paid in full. Together, All obligations are being immediately paid in full. And people have daily said this, affirmed it, known it, and they've received tremendous help by that. So consider writing down what your obligations might be. Or maybe other people owe you something. And write those down and trusting Spirit's working through that situation. Now that's different from a regular bill collectors, right? Business people who have gone about the regular means of how to collect payments from other people. Well, there have been people who have applied this, according to Ponder. They've applied this method, changing the inner, and it worked tremendous results for them. So if you've tried other things and people aren't paying you back, or you've had challenges in your own life paying off your bills, try writing them down. Try affirming this on a regular basis to develop that consciousness for yourself. And now another way to follow through with prosperous action is to begin to pay with cash. Begin to pay with cash. Many years ago, probably 30 years ago, well, 1997, whenever that was, many years ago, I took a workshop called You and Money. It was by a woman named Maria Nemeth. Now, I was living in a spiritual community at the time. I was making my way out of the community at that point, and I was trying to move my life forward. And I took this course called You and Money, which was by a woman who went on to write several books. She was on Oprah. She was a very successful coach for people. I knew a lot of Unity ministers who went through her program. I took the program. And I don't even know that I had credit cards at that time. But there were people in the workshop who did, who were in deep debt in their credit cards. And one of the things that she did was she had people cut up their credit cards. And I remember, and I'm not a financial whiz by any means in this regard, but I did remember, I learned that interest on credit cards was really a difficult thing to get out of. Now, once you put money on credit cards and then there's interest, and then you miss the payments on that interest, and then there's these big fees, and all of that, it can really start to escalate. So she had people cutting up credit cards and beginning to pay with cash. Well, when eventually I got credit cards, that lesson stuck with me, and it was served tremendously helpful over the years to never get into such debt that it felt overwhelming, and but to use it so that it's a convenience. I mean, if you're renting a car, you need a credit card. If you need a hotel room, you probably need a credit card. Sometimes it can come in handy for short-term stuff, but to not use it like it's cash, because it's not cash, right? A debit card is like cash. Using debit cards, using cash itself is a very powerful thing, because every time you pull out the cash, it makes you conscious of what you're spending, right? And a lot of spending can be unconscious. It can be, it's easy to give somebody a card, to run up a card where it's invisible. You're not looking at, it's easy to do that. But it's important for us to pray and to seek to use our finances with wisdom, right? To pray for guidance about things that we want to purchase. To sit in prayer about big purchases. To put some distance between us and the things that we want to purchase. Because sometimes the emotions will cool, right? Give your emotions time to cool. Get in tune with your inner wisdom and guidance so that you're guided in the purchases that you make. You're using good judgment and wisdom to make those purchases. And I think it's a great idea to use a debit card mostly and to spend with cash. Now, I know people who use credit cards because they like the perks that come with the more you spend, you get free airfare and all this stuff. Again, I'm not a financial whiz, but I've avoided that stuff because I don't want to constantly be aware of deadlines to pay off a credit card. And I hate missing deadlines. I use that word hate. Probably shouldn't use that word hate. But I don't like to miss deadlines and get fees. You know what I mean? But different strokes for different folks on that regard. But in general, I think paying in cash, using the debit card, not running up credit card debt, because it can become a real burden in time. And if we find ourselves in a burden like that, I think it's important that we start to pray on a daily basis. Stop using that darn credit card. Start taking small actions by shifting our prosperous attitudes. Begin paying off what we can, maybe creating an account. There's a lot of great wisdom out there. I've read a number of books on it. In fact, I encourage people to get some of these books that are, on just basic financial management to help one learn to how do you get out of debt. It's possible to get out of debt. And with God, all things are possible. With God, all things are possible. Well, we can live without that noose of debt around our necks, and having that burden by shifting our attitudes, more prosperous attitudes, and beginning to take some actions to shift that situation. As Charles Fillmore, in his book Prosperity, he talks about praying to God, taking God as your partner, and realizing that in God there is no debt. Right? As a spiritual being, there is no God in debt. That you don't owe anybody anything but love, ultimately. But that doesn't mean you just disregard our bills and our obligation. No, that's not what it means. But what it means that in spirit is the source. God is abundance. There is no debt in God. And to take God as our partner and to pray and to put God first and to use good wisdom and judgment. And as time goes on, as Charles Fillmore says, you'll find you have a little more money here, a little more money there. You manage your finances better. You don't spend as much. You start utilizing it in a positive way. And that's not self-denial. That's just learning good judgment and good wisdom. And you find that you have more and more money as time goes on until you no longer have that burden of debt. Now money starts to multiply. It contributes to your abundance and your prosperity. And that's possible for everyone. I can relate to that because years ago in 2008, I was living in an apartment in Hilton Head Island, tough place for somebody to be, and the beautiful palm trees and the semi-tropical climate with 30 golf courses and so on. But I was living in a apartment, and some big organization bought the apartment complex. So they gave everyone in the apartment complex the opportunity to buy the apartment if you want to. So I thought, well, that would be a good investment, and I could pay even lower rent by buying it. So I bought it. And then in 2008, 2009, the housing thing went right down the drain, right? So now I had an apartment that was worth, I think in a couple of years, it was worth 2/3 of what I paid it, maybe even half of what I paid it. And my financial advisor at the time suggested, well, maybe you want to foreclose on this apartment, and what would that do if you did such a thing like that? Well, I said, that's not a good idea. I don't believe in foreclosing I don't want to foreclose on anything like that. So I just went with it, and over time just paid the repairs, did the things that needed to be done, had renters in and out of it and so on, and just was sort of offered it up to God and just did what I had to do, right? And then a couple of years ago, what happened? The housing went back up. Not only was it, I actually made a profit on selling it. Everything shifted back again and all that because I owe it to spirit. I owe it to that inner wisdom, that trying to handle all things in prayer and trying to follow that inner guidance through it all. And you and I can do the same thing with every area of our life. If you struggle with some kind of debt, then know that with God, you can get out of debt. You just need to pray and handle it and start doing the things that you can. Shift your attitude to prosperous attitudes. Begin to let go of the criticism, let go of the burden, the feeling of worry and fear. Start to take the actions that you can take to get out of debt. And then lastly, be open to divine ideas. Charles Fillmore said that ideas are the coin of the kingdom. The coin of the kingdom. That you can get creative ideas that can help you in whatever you're doing, whatever you're doing. And, you know, the mind of God has an infinite flow of ideas. And as an expression of God, you can get ideas that can help you. What I love about this is, I don't know about you, but you can get so many ideas, you're overwhelmed by them, right? This one business person had all kinds of ideas, but he was unhappy in his work. He was making money, he had a nice family, but he wasn't making enough money. How many of you have some growing family that it would be nice to have more income to help you out in your situation? You need it. Times are tough out there for a lot of people. Businesses are doing all kinds of stuff these days, trying to make it work. And there are families that are struggling with meeting their basic needs, and he was one of them. And he said, the only way I can make more money in this company is if one of the higher ups retires. You know, and I certainly am not going to be aggressive and try to make that happen. So he was advised to take an easier, more peaceful, loving approach. So he started to pray about his situation. He started to pray about what could he do in this situation to begin to experience greater prosperity. He started to ask, Father, what is the rich truth about my financial situation? Now you could say mother, father, mother, spirit, energy, consciousness, whatever words you want to use. He used Father. Father, what is the rich truth about my financial affairs? What is your highest good for all in this situation? I love that. He wasn't just about what can I get, how can I get it, but what is the highest good for everybody in this situation? What shall I do, Spirit? And he began to work with this prayer every day. Father, what is the rich truth about my financial affairs? What is your highest good for all in this situation? And one day he was affirming this for himself. He was praying this for himself. And he said that into his head flashed an idea that almost knocked him out of his chair. He said, I'd had that idea before many times, but only in this instance did I feel it with such certainty that I had confidence enough to go to my supervisors, to go to my superiors in the business, and to present the idea. And the idea was to start a whole nother department. A whole other department. And his superior was impressed. He was impressed that this quiet guy had an idea that could bring a fresh life into the company, that could bring greater prosperity into the company. So eventually, as time went on, he started this new department, and he got a new title, and with it, a raise and more prosperity and abundance for he and his family. What happened? He opened up to the mind of spirit. He opened up to the mind of God and the creative ideas that were there. So what is it that you're dealing with in your life? What is your financial challenge? What are you working with in your work? Would you like greater prosperity and greater finance, greater abundance in your life? Open up to the creativity of God within you. Open up to the flow of ideas, and maybe use this prayer that I just shared with you. And ideas will start to flow. And I love the idea that what God wanted him to know, Spirit made it obvious. I love that. Somebody like me who can get very analytical, can get all kinds of ideas, sometimes needs that cosmic 2x4 to say, this is the idea, right? How many of you need a cosmic 2x4 sometimes to say, this is the idea, a neon sign, you know? God, make it so clear that I can't miss it. What I'm supposed to do in this situation. Give me an idea that I can't miss it. And regularly, by developing prosperous attitudes, by shifting, letting go of unforgiveness toward yourself, unforgiveness toward others, letting go of critical attitudes, letting go of bitterness, beginning to affirm harmony and love for yourself and love for other people, beginning to take some of these small actions that can move you forward, that can help instill greater confidence, help you know that you're making progress, starting to pay off some of these things that we need to pay off, and doing it all with God. In time with God, you can get out of debt. You can experience a greater financial abundance in your life. You can experience a greater freedom, but first start to develop it within yourself. Start to develop that sense of freedom, that peace, that love, that joy, that relationship with God within yourself. And with God, all things are possible. Let's get still for a moment. And we thank you, Father, Mother, God, for your inspiration. We thank you for your guidance and direction in our life. We know that where there's a need, there's a solution, Father, Mother, God. And we know that you contain the answers and the guidance that we require, that we need. Thank you for guiding us. Thank you for helping us to do the things that can help us move forward with our life. Thank you for showing us how to better manage our finances. Thank you for helping us to know what actions we can take and to feel that inner freedom and to feel greater hope and confidence as we take these actions. We give thanks that you care about us. We're grateful that you care about us. You care about our life. You care about our finances. You care about every aspect of our life. We remember the truth that Jesus said, it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Thank you, and so it is. Amen. God bless you. Namaste.